Good morning.
It is.
I'm in a relationship with someone who was in another relationship. He's divorced. And I've been with this person for about 10, 11 years. And a few years ago, his ex-wife wanted alimony from him. So he's been paying her alimony, and now he's thinking about he wants to retire, but he can't with paying alimony. And when you were talking about the art of allowing, he and I have had discussions similar to that, and he's very resistant to that because the court has ruled in his ex-wife's favor. So he doesn't think that if he thinks a positive thought that it's going to change anything for him.
It may not change that ruling, but it will change a lot for him. In other words, it may not change the ruling about what he must pay out, but it certainly will change what he lets in.
What do you mean?
Well, we do not disagree with him that it appears that once the court has made a decision, and since he is wanting to live by the laws of the land and not go to jail, that it seems that this has already been decided, and we do not disagree that that is a decision that has been made. But there is a stream of energy, a stream of well-being that includes all of the abundance that flows. And when you are feeling resentful or worried about the dollars that are flowing out, you hold yourself in vibrational resistance to more dollars flowing in. So what happens is then things just continue as they are, where if he could step away from the details of it and try to feel better about what is happening, in other words, try to find some vibration of appreciation in there somewhere, then he would be in the place of allowing more abundance to flow to him and through him. He probably believes that he has this static experience where only so many dollars will come. In other words, that's all part of the belief process too. You see, what happens is, in all of that, in his life experience, even in the life experience that he is living where someone else is wanting dollars that flow through him, even as the court has said, you must earn some dollars and you must give them over here, in all of that desire, there is a summoning process. You might say that his ex-wife is summoning, and part of her desire is being summoned through him. Your desire is being summoned through him. In other words, his desire is being summoned through him. There's a lot that is being summoned through him. So now the question is, how much is he allowing to flow? And the dollars that are coming into his experience is not about what's being summoned, it's about what he's letting in, you see. Most of you let in only through the crack of least resistance. And so most people only allow the abundance that they can believe through this action. In other words, I can work this many hours and I can get this much per hour. Therefore, the abundance that I am able to achieve is only so much. And we say, and it is through that crack of resistance that you will allow those dollars to flow. So what happens is, as he feels blame, and he may very well be justified, or as he feels anger, and he may very well be justified, what happens is he just uses that as his excuse to not allow the dollars to flow.
The thing is that we've talked about this, and he'll feel good for a few days, but then when it comes time to write the check, he just goes back to where he was.
Here's what we've noticed is that if he is writing the check once a month and it takes a minute to do it, to write it, to enter it, to lick it shut. In other words, if he is taking a whole minute or 5 minutes even out of the month to do that, and then he's not thinking about it the rest of the time, then there's not much happening in his vibration that is hindering. But if he writes it and then broods about it and then resents it, and every time he goes to buy something laments the fact that he can't afford that because of that, and he can't afford that because of that, and he can't afford that because of that, now he's using that as a greater excuse not to allow the energy to flow. And what we've noticed, it's not an easy thing not to think about something. In other words, we would like to say to him that if he could just write the check and then forget about it and focus upon other things that make him feel good, then he would, for the most part, allow abundance to flow. But what happens is, as he uses other things during his experience as to remind him about that, so that he holds himself in a pretty steady place of not allowing, then his experience matches that. One thing is always certain. What I'm thinking and feeling and what's manifesting in my experience is always a perfect vibrational match every time. And sometimes people come to gatherings like this because they want to learn how to offer a vibration so that they can affect their manifestation. And we think that's a wonderful thing. We think that's what deliberate creating is. But we also think it's a wonderful thing to examine the content of what you're living in order to understand what your vibrational offering is, you see. So what we would encourage him to do, we can give it to you. We would like to say to you that the only thing that we can give you is what we're giving you. In other words, as you no longer worry about him, then you can influence him, because you can't, it is not likely that the words that you repeat to him will have any great effect, because he sort of has his mind made up about it. But if we were visiting face to face with him, what we would say is this. If you are in a vibration of appreciation, or a vibration of love, or even a vibration of no thought, as in meditation, then you are not in a place that is disallowing what you want. So let's talk about what he wants. The contrast of writing these checks, and they're rather significant checks in relationship to his overall income. So the experience of writing those checks is causing a continual rocket of desire to be born. And what is that desire saying? The desire is saying, I would like more dollars. I would like more dollars to have more experience. I would like to be able to provide for my life and my loved ones in a more significant way. So those rockets of desire are being born even every time he has that unpleasant experience of writing that check. And every time what he is saying to the universe, not with his words, but with every fiber of his being, is, I'm wanting to be of value, I'm wanting to be a success, I'm wanting dollars to flow, I'm wanting to live a good life, I'm wanting to have profitable experiences, I'm wanting to have financial well-being. In other words, he's launching that all over the place. And every time he does, the universal forces, and we're not kidding you about this, we tease as we say fairies of the universe, but we are not kidding you. Universal forces, all that is, answer that request that's going off within him. So if he had 10 ex-wives that were demanding dollars from him, he would have 10 times the desire shooting out of him, and the universe would be yielding to him 10 times as much. We're not kidding. The desire factor is a big part in the pulling power. Good word, pulling power. In other words, contrast causes me to desire, and desire has pulling power, summoning power. What's it pulling in? What's it summoning? Creative life force, creative energy, money, all things that you consider to be good are all coming on that stream, you see. So now, if he could find a way to hold himself in a vibration where he was letting it in, then more dollars would flow. We would say, if he can find the place in his mind, he could reach a place where he actually feels appreciation for her desire, which caused desire within him that summoned energy. Because once he finds a way to allow it, his financial well-being will be many times more significant than if it were not happening. You see, often physical friends think that they've got this one little cup of financial well-being. It's like the economy. There's one little cup of economy. And if that guy over there gets a whole bunch of it, then he's depriving all of those of it. And it is not that way at all. The energy expands proportionate to the desire that is being conjured or being focused, you see. And so as your mate has experience that cause his desire to be more sharply focused, he has more pulling power going on. And if he could just relax and chill out, things would happen, amazing things that would happen to satisfy that. Now, the way we would approach the releasing of resistance is by saying you cannot appreciate and resist at the same time. So if he could find a way of appreciating the relationship that they had together, appreciate the support that she once gave. Now, that's hard for you to find that place. In other words, most people who have experienced breakup or relationship think that, well, in order to justify this breaking apart, I'll just keep reminding myself how awful it was and how glad I am that we broke apart. And we say, all that does is cause more resistance. Sometimes when a new relationship is formed, the attitude is, I'm really not wanting him to find appreciation for his ex-wife. What if he finds appreciation for his ex-wife and then starts to attract her back into his experience? Isn't it better that he loathe her and keep her out there at arm's length, you see? And what we are really wanting you to hear is that you cannot love or appreciate and resist at the same time. So if this were a subject that he could not think about but once a month for a few minutes, we would say nothing needs to be done about this. Contrast is producing desire. He's out there moving through life experience. There's that 5 minutes in the relationship to all the time in a month is not a great deal of resistance. It doesn't factor in very big in his experience, and we would say there really isn't anything to do. Just bip along, live happily ever after, and more dollars will flow. But since he is using that as a source of pushing against, now we would say it would be necessary for him to do some work on his vibration around the subject of money. And since the relationship was pointed, and still is, in other words, is because of the dynamics of the dollar exchange, we would say the easiest way for him to get into a place of allowing abundance to flow to him relative to the subject of dollars is by finding true appreciation for every place that the dollars are flowing to. In other words, when he writes the check, if he could say, I'm pleased that I have the wherewithal to send this. I'm pleased that you will be the receiver of it. I'm pleased that these dollars are being utilized in some way that is beneficial. I'm appreciative of the relationship that we once had. I look forward to the time when you are more self-sufficient. I look forward to the time when more dollars are flowing into my experience. I am happy to offer these dollars to you, knowing that there is a never-ending stream of dollars flowing to me, in and out, 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 in and out. It's not so different from air. We don't see any of you standing out on your porch in the morning worried that others will suck up all the air. And so you try to fill your lungs, try to carry bags of air around, fearful that somebody else will get it all. You just accept that what your body needs, what your body wants, when you run, your body asks for more, and you don't carry a notebook around. Body took more air from 8 to 9 while I ran. In other words, you just accept in and out. Whatever is necessary is naturally received. It is naturally given. And when you have the same attitude toward dollars, in other words, the universe is abundant, the desire has been focused, the ex-wife even helps in focusing the desire, more pulling power is happening, so the only question is, am I letting it in? And if I'm happy as I write the check, I'm letting it in. If I'm not even thinking about it as I'm writing the check, I'm letting it in. As it's a non-issue as I'm writing the check, I'm letting it in. As I'm irritated as I'm writing the check, I'm not letting it in. If I'm upset that I can't buy the barbecue because I wrote the check, I'm not letting it in. In other words, you can tell by the way you feel whether you're letting it in. And little by little by little by little by little, you let more in, more in, more in, until it becomes a non-issue. Even if the court said she gets a proportionate percentage of his income, the more he lets in, the more he'll have to spend as well, you see. Now that's worth thinking about. Let's chew on this just for a moment to put this in a very clear perspective. Let's pretend that his income is $10,000 a month, and let's pretend that she gets 40% of it. So let's pretend that as he earns $10,000, he writes a check for $4,000. Now let's pretend that he lets in $100,000 in a month. And let's pretend that he writes her a check for $40,000. Now the question is, if he has decided that she is undeserving, then whether he gives her $1 or whether he gives her $40,000, $40,000 sort of amplifies that more, doesn't it? In other words, I'm giving her, she was bad to me, she threw me out, my clothes were on the lawn, and now I'm giving her $40,000. And so as you look at it from that perspective, we think that it sort of gets it into the place of clarity where you realize that sometimes it's not so much about what's left over for me as it is me not wanting it to be for something else, you see. We teased with Jerry and Esther. Jerry was not liking the idea of paying big income taxes. He didn't like that feeling of them taking so much. They're not on the road. They're not out there doing the work. They're not in on it, and yet such a big peace is going to them. And we said, when you write your check for your quarterly taxes, just earmark it for the things that you want. In other words, feel appreciation think about the things in your nation or in your world that you would like to contribute to, and mentally, vibrationally, earmark it for that, and feel appreciation for all the dollars that are flowing in. Don't pay any attention to, in other words, don't worry about who's getting a piece of what. It is universal energy. In other words, energy is flowing. There is enough. There is always enough. There is always enough when you open up and let it in. What is your economy anyway? In other words, what is economy? It is the exchange of energy. It is the exchange of, your economy is the exchange of human energy, you see. And it expands proportionate to the desires that are happening. And so as mass consciousness is bombarded with contrast that gives birth to desires. The little girl who wants the doll that she saw on television, or the child who sees the computer set up and he can't wait, or the little one that sees the drums and wants it. Every one of these consciousnesses that is exposed to contrast, that is giving birth to desire, is a huge contributor to economy, because that pulling power is happening, and globally and universally it is being answered. The question is, where am I as an individual allower, and how much of this economy that's being created worldwide am I letting in? Better stated, who am I using as my excuse not to let it in? Good.
Thank you.
Indeed. Something more?
No.
You'll hear more as we're moving forward. Where are you? Right here, yes.